from the American Academy of Pediatrics.
Breastfeeding is one of the hardest things I have personally ever done. There's establishing your milk supply, which happens in the weeks you're recovering from the birth. And when it feels like you did it, you kind of realize how long you're about to have to spend either with a baby on your breast or pumping, not to mention the time washing pump parts and thinking about how to store your milk safely. So today we're talking about the things I wish I knew and I wish more families knew about this journey.
Don't let yourself be that inner mean girl. I think that's really a message that moms need to hear, is to hype yourself up. Be nice to yourself. You grew this baby for 9 months, and now you're providing their sole source of nutrition or part of their source of nutrition. Like, good job. Like, we need to just celebrate that a little bit more.
Welcome to Healthy Children, the podcast for parents from the American Academy of Pediatrics. I'm Dr. Edith Bracho-Sanchez. I'm a pediatrician and a mama figuring it out. This is a judgment-free space where all questions are good questions and the answers will hopefully be even better. Let's get started. Today, I am joined by Dr. Hailey Nelson, who is a pediatrician at Valley Children's in California and a mom who is breastfed. Hailey, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Hailey, I'm intentionally going to skip past listing all the benefits of breastfeeding at length because I think most parents have heard of these. Quickly, I'll just say that there are many benefits from improved immunity to common illnesses to improved digestion, and there are even benefits to brain development, bonding, and more. But where I'd really like to start our conversation is with this statistic that I find both fascinating and concerning. Studies have shown that a large number of moms intend to breastfeed for 3 months or longer. The number is 85%. But of those 85%, only about 30% meet that goal. And when you look at moms who want to breastfeed for a year, only 25% make it to 6 months. Again, the ones who say, I really want to breastfeed for a year, only 25% make it to 6 months. Hailey, why do you think this is?
I think it's multifactorial. We know that breastfeeding has its challenges. And so coming in with that intention, that mindset of like, yes, I want to breastfeed, but you also need that knowledge and you definitely need support to be able to meet your feeding goals. And so really focusing in on what support is lacking for these mamas and how do we help them so that that feeding journey ends when they want it to end instead of prematurely.
Oh my gosh, that support is so key. I'll just tell you, Hailey, when I started my breastfeeding journey, I was literally tied to the chair and my family was cooking and cleaning and coming to feed me and bringing me coffee and bringing me water and snacks. It's just so hard to do more than breastfeeding, especially at the beginning. Now, my question though for you is, what do we say to moms who want to breastfeed? And I know this is a tough question, but say there are moms who want to breastfeed, but maybe they don't have a big family who's coming by to cook, to clean, to take care of everything else so that they can establish their milk supply and do this.
Yeah, so support is important, but it doesn't necessarily have to be someone right there all the time. It's finding ways that each individual needs support. Maybe having your mom there actually stresses you out, and that's okay to like have a break too. But that if you're needing that, texting your bestie, having her come over and she says, you're doing a great job, let me get a load of laundry for you. So finding a way to build your support network that actually benefits you, because we all need support in different ways, and finding what that looks like for you so that you can be successful.
Yeah, I'll admit to being bad about asking for help. And later on, I realized people really did want to help.
Right. And then people want to help. And then they sometimes say things that don't feel helpful, like, oh, to sleep when the baby sleeps. I'm like, okay, in practicality.
Who's going to do everything else? Yeah.
Right. And so it's take it with a grain of salt. Also, if you're looking for help, to not Google. How many moms come in because they saw something? So I point them to Healthy Children. I'm like, okay, if you're going to be scrolling and you're looking for advice, like go to Healthy Children because it's at least written for you by pediatricians. Like we're here to help you. And if you have questions, that's also what my chart's available for. Like send me a message. Like I want to help you reach your goals, but to not be fooled by crazy things that you might have Googled at 3 a.m.
Absolutely. I'm curious, Hailey, where do you start the conversation in your own practice? Say you have a mom who's a first-time mom and the baby comes to see you, as they often do right after they're born, right? What do you ask and what do you say?
When I start the conversation with what their goals are, like I come in, I know what my bias is. I know my experience as a mom and how hard it was with my son and the challenges with my daughter and all the other things that led me to be the ultimate nerd when it comes to lactation and to want to study and better support. But in that moment, it's about the mom in front of me. And so I want to know what her idea is. Like, what does this feeding journey look like? And how can I help you reach that goal? So we're going to work together, but you tell me what you want, and then we'll get there.
Yeah, I wish more moms knew that the vast majority of us pediatricians really do start this conversation with, what are your goals? We're really not trying to impose anything. We're trying to be of service, right? As best we can. One thing I have to tell you that my lactation consultant explained to me beautifully soon after my son was born was this concept of establishing the milk supply. How do you explain that to families? I'm so curious. And how do you work with families so that the mom can establish the milk supply?
Right. We know those first 2 weeks are critical for mom's body to figure out that there's this baby that we're feeding. And so the more skin to skin time that she has with her baby and bringing baby to breast frequently. So we talk about babies eating, like every 1 to 3 hours, but sometimes they cluster feed. And if they're rooting at all, to go ahead and latch them back on, because every time baby is latching on, that's giving mom's body a signal that I got to make more milk. I got to make more milk. And that over that 2-week period, your body knows like, oh, this baby is this big and wants this much milk. And so you kind of get into your groove after that. But it's really a supply and demand. And so being able to empty your breasts of milk so that then they can fill back up. And when we pause and we get frustrated or something happens and someone decides to be helpful and wants to give baby a bottle, if mom isn't pumping, if her body's not getting that signal, but baby's tummy's getting filled in another way, that's where we're missing the boat, because we now didn't give that message. And now we're down a bottle of milk that our body could have made. And so that's where everything's trying to regulate. It's also a really exhausting time in those kind of that first 2-week window. And so really recognizing how tired moms are and trying to support them through to be able to establish a good supply.
Yeah. When would you say, Hailey, I'm just curious, that supply is somewhat established? Because really that's sort of the undertone in some ways of what we're talking about. We establish a supply early on that is in response to what our baby demands, because that's sort of going to get fixed at some point. So how do you explain to families that the supply is fixed, and when should they expect it to be fixed?
So I try not to think of it in an absolute. So we certainly have that first 2-week window where we were getting that supply up and going and helping our body regulate. But then after that, meeting baby's needs. And so all of a sudden, baby's going to go through a growth spurt. And just when they were, feeding every 3 hours and you're like, okay, I can do this, they want to eat every 30 minutes. And you're like, what is going on? Why is my child so hungry? And it's because they know that they're going to grow and they're signaling to your body to make more milk. And so if you hang in there and you cluster feed with them, you're going to upregulate and you'll make more milk. And so your milk supply grows and changes throughout that whole first year and even beyond. So it's really a dynamic process, and to not give up hope if you're worried about low supply, like we have other tips we can talk about. There's things that you can do. So it's never too late. It's never too little, but really pausing to say like, hey, what are your goals? And if you're feeling frustrated, reach out for help.
I love that. And I can definitely attest to my supply very much changing in response to the growth spurts. It was impressive. I mean, in many ways, you just have a new appreciation for what the body can do, right? As we're sort of nourishing our little ones. Hailey, since you brought up low supply, and I find that that is a concern for many moms, how do you counsel through that? And what are some tips to increase our supply?
Well, the first thing is to talk to your doctor to see, do you actually have a low supply? Don't be fooled by the pictures on social media, what other moms say that they get when they pump. Like, don't compare with anyone else. Like, how is your baby growing? And if your baby's growing well and making plenty of wet diapers and poopy diapers, like if they're gaining and following their curve, you're good. Your supply is just fine. So I find that some mamas just need that reassurance to continue on. Now, for another mom who maybe you got sick, maybe something else happened that caused your supply to go down, well, then there are ways to help bring it back up. So that's when we talk about things like power pumping. So you can actually use your breast pump and mimic that cluster feeding that baby does to help give that extra stimulation so that your body can upregulate and make you some more milk if that's what you need to do.
I love that. I love that. And I do got to tell you, I definitely fell for some of those comparisons, including with family members, right? My sister was breastfeeding at the same time that I was breastfeeding, and she had all this extra milk that she was donating. And I was like, what is wrong with my body? I don't have extra milk. There was nothing wrong with my body. My child was growing, but I was convinced that something was very wrong. Hailey, I find also that as moms prepare to return to work or face other life transitions, of which there are many, there's an increased interest in pumping and storing milk. How do you guide families through that? And again, let's say that I'm a breastfeeding mom, I'm going back to work next month. How do I start to build a little stash so that another caregiver can give this to my child?
Oh, that secret word. How do I build a stash? Like everyone wants a stash. And again, you see the pictures on social media of these freezers and the milk lined up.
Yes.
I want you to feed your baby, not your freezer.
I love that.
That is the first thing I'm going to tell a mom. When you go back to work, you need enough milk to feed your baby for that day, because while you're at work, you're going to be pumping and bringing home fresh milk that they can have tomorrow. That's really all that you need. Now, of course, moms, we worry, we like that little extra wiggle room, but you do not need a full freezer unless you're going to be traveling away to Antarctica or somewhere crazy and gone for a long time from your baby. You just need a day's supply. That's really all that you should focus on. And instead of spending your maternity leave attached to the pump and stressing about it, just spend the time with your baby.
Yeah, I love that. Now, I do want to ask you, because the other question that I get a lot as moms are transitioning and going back to work is how to introduce formula. And I know that we don't talk a lot about this part because we sort of assume that you just buy the formula, make the formula, introduce a formula. But a lot of babies really struggle and moms want to have some of that flexibility. What do you say to someone who's like, listen, my goal is to keep pumping, but what if I don't get the break that I thought I was going to get at work, and now I need to give a couple ounces of formula to get me through the day? How do you introduce it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there are all those what ifs, especially as a mom, that creep into our heads. I would say if you have another provider, someone else who can help you out to feed baby that bottle of formula, it actually can go better. Babies know that you're the one, like if you're the mom who's making them their milk, they know. And so they might be angry at you just because they're like, why aren't you giving me the good stuff? So separating it from the breastfeeding mom and letting that be someone else's job can actually make it a little bit easier.
Oh, so interesting. I got to tell you, I failed. Mine went on a hunger strike when he started daycare. He wouldn't eat anything, so it was a tough couple of days. And then eventually we made it through the transition, as most babies do.
Okay, but hold on. You didn't fail. Like we tell ourselves these things all the time. You did not. No, I was breastfeeding and at the hospital and realized I left half the pump parts at home. So I remember calling my husband and like nursing the baby in the parking lot because I didn't even have the things that I needed. Like, trust me, but did I fail? No. Is my child now graduating from kindergarten tomorrow? Yes. Like it all works out. So don't let yourself be that inner mean girl. I think that's really a message that moms need to hear, is to hype yourself up. Be nice to yourself. You grew this baby for 9 months and now you're providing their sole source of nutrition or part of their source of nutrition. Like, good job. Like we need to just celebrate that a little bit more.
Yeah, don't be that inner mean girl, which I am definitely, guilty of doing. Going back to breast milk, Hailey, what is the best way to store it? Remind us of the rules of safe storage of breast milk.
Yeah. So storing it depends on when you're going to use it again. If you plan on giving a bottle later that day, Breast milk is fine out at room temperature for 4 hours. It's then good for 4 days in your refrigerator, but if you're not going to use it in that time frame, go ahead and freeze it. Now, the key thing with freezing your breast milk is you want to store it in smaller amounts. So if your baby's only taking 2-ounce bottles, don't store a giant 8-ounce bag because once you thaw it, it then has a time frame that it's good for. So storing it in ways that make it easier for you to use when you thaw it is going to be a time saver later on.
Yeah, I remember someone got me so many of these little baggies that only store 4 ounces, I think, at a time. It was so helpful, so helpful. I already knew that I had a very fixed amount in there that I could sort of thaw out when I needed.
Your milk is fine. I will tell them that it's fine. Yeah. No, and then also people think that you have to store it at write down the time. So then moms get really obsessed about well, if you pump milk at night, then that's nighttime milk that has to be given. The time doesn't matter.
I remember that. I remember that.
Right? It's but and they you hear all these things where people really obsess. I'm just feed your baby. It's going to be fine.
The other thing I remember seeing is moms that started labeling these little baggies with time of day. And I mean, yes, of course, you have to date it so that you know how long you've had it, but also this notion that the milk that you pumped this week may not be the best match nutritionally for your baby 2 weeks from now. Is there any truth to this time of day or best match right now type of thinking, Hailey?
No, you really just go ahead and feed your baby. If you have some pumped milk and it is time to give a bottle, great. Use that. Time of day is not going to impact your baby's sleep cycle. It's not going to change the calorie content enough for us as pediatricians to stress about it. So moms, let's stress a little less and use that liquid gold. We refer to it as liquid gold because it's so good for your baby. So go ahead and feed it. And again, be proud of yourself that you made it.
Love that. I love that. Hailey, any tips for making pumping at work a little bit easier?
Yeah, I really love a good dress rehearsal. So way before you ever are heading back to work, going through all of the steps. At home, I had my whole setup of where I nursed and where I pumped and all of the things. And I was able to just kind of sprawl out. But when I was going back to work, I knew I needed to pack it into the bag and then be able to pull out the parts and thinking about even where I was going to clean off my counter. And hey, I also want some snacks for myself. So multitasking when you're pumping, getting that hands-free bra set up so that you can be snacking, you can be scrolling on your phone or answering emails, whatever else, looking at pictures of your baby, that can be really helpful too. So bring those pictures. You could always do a video call for your baby at home while you're pumping at work on those first days when you're feeling sad and away from them. But having an idea and practicing that setup so that you don't do what I did, which is bring your bag with only half of the things in it and then have that panic. And so the more that we can practice to make that part of pumping easier, the better it'll go.
Yeah, and knowing where you're going to go do this at work, right? And what time and what the accommodations at work are. I got to tell you, our office was wonderful about accommodating me, but they hadn't accommodated anyone in a while. So we had to work together to figure out how I was going to take breaks. Once we did, it was great, but there was some conversations that needed to be had. Hailey, I also want to ask you about weaning off the breast, which I think would be its own episode. But what do you say to moms when they come to you and they're like, okay, this has been great. I am ready to stop now. How do I do this?
Yeah. Again, when you're ready to be done, wonderful. Let's figure it out. And it's all about dropping feeds slowly. So you don't want to abruptly just be like, I'm done breastfeeding and go from feeding every feed to just stopping because you're going to be uncomfortable. You're going to have that risk of engorgement, mastitis, clogged ducts, none of the things that a mom wants to deal with. So instead, think about the feeds that are a little less special. Which feeds can you slowly drop and let someone else do for you and you skip pumping during that time? And then which feeds do you want to hang on to a little bit longer? I love that bedtime feed and just sitting there in the rocking chair after a long day of work. I've missed my baby. And so that was a really special time for me to just connect with my baby. So that was the last one to go just because I enjoyed my extra snuggles. And as a mama, I think that you deserve to have that snuggle time too. So figure out which ones are important. And then, hey, 3 a.m., maybe dad gets to give a bottle and I get to sleep a little bit longer.
Yeah, I love that. It really is about what works for you and your baby. Hailey, as we come to the end of our show, we like to end with what we call a parenting prescription. So when it comes to the breastfeeding journey, what is one thing you want all parents to remember?
Ooh, I think I want all parents to remember that breastfeeding is actually a family meal and it's not just mom's job. And so really thinking about that support, you said your family would come and feed you while you were feeding baby, and thinking about how can everybody else chip in and help out so that we can make sure this mom is empowered and feels successful in her journey.
I can't think of a better way to end our show today. Thank you so much, Dr. Hailey Nelson, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you at home for joining us as well. If you like the Healthy Children podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app and help us spread the word. Follow Healthy Children on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Threads at Healthy Children AAP, and be sure to visit healthychildren.org, the parenting website of the American Academy of Pediatrics. Healthy Children is a production of the American Academy of Pediatrics. Our creative team includes
Laura Alessio,
Catherine Beard,
Garrett Brown,
Zach Christman,
Ann Johnsos, Kathy Jewell,
Claire Keating,
Doug Nagel,
Jackie Ortega,
Susan Stevens Martin,
Mary Claire Walsh,
Hannah Weston.
And our theme music was composed by Doug Nagel. We'll be back next week. I'm Dr. Edith Bracho-Sanchez. Thanks for listening.